What is up, fight fans? I am Jason Burgos for Sportsnaut, and of course, with me as always is the herald of hate for Ringside Intel, and that is Anthony Walker. But for this special edition, a special UFC 298 themed edition of the podcast, we are joined by one of the great minds in the MMA game. He's a longtime analyst for ESPN, a revered coach for many top fighters over the last couple of decades, and one of the funniest men in the sport. And as the one, the only Din Thomas, Senor Dinero. Thanks so much for time.
Hey, what's going on, fellas? Hey, I appreciate the intro, especially about being funny, because I did a podcast with Phil Rowe and his boy the other day, and I literally was like the only one. Every time I say something, it'd be absolute quiet after. And then when they would say something, everybody would laugh. So I go, man, I'm not as good as I thought I was. I bombed in front of my friends.
To us, you're hilarious. You're the man. You're the funniest man in MMA to me. And we have a lot of questions and a lot of stuff to talk about. I'm sure we're going to have a lot of laughs ahead. But the first thing I want to ask about, so you have a long history with American Top Team. And I have no doubt during that time you've gotten to know like a guy like Colby Covington a little bit. With him like recently coming up with this my leg thing or whatever during his last fight, and then his just a weird level of inactivity in fights and this weird way he promotes himself, similar to how wrestlers go from being good to bad and then back to good again. Is it time Colby Covington kind of reimagined his shtick? Is it time he goes in a different direction for the rest of his career? Do we need to get old Colby back and just put MAGA Colby in the suitcase?
No, you were right about one thing. He needs to retire. He needs to retire. He needs to take his ass back somewhere. Listen, man, this is the thing. You know, when Tyron Woodley was 39 years old, these guys was beating up on him, and they were all pumping their chests and waving their fists around. But he's 39 years old. These guys got to understand that as soon as you hit about 37, 38, that's it for you. And Colby spent his last couple of good years sitting on the side talking trash. He should have been fighting, because I do not think he's going to be able to come back and ever put together a win streak like he thinks he can in his own head. So all the excuses, think about this. If his foot was hurt, he didn't say nothing the night of. He blamed him losing that decision on him being a Trump fan. But he said, I waited till the x-rays come out to make sure my foot was broke. Now I can show y'all that my foot was broke. So here's the real excuse. Why didn't he say it that night? He should have just said it. Look, my foot is kind of hurt. I don't know what I did. I had a poor performance. Congrats to Leon. Then he would have been able to turn it over. But the fact that he went to the Trump excuse first, now it's his foot. But the reality is he's older now. Colby was a damn good fighter in his prime, but he's older now, and it's never going to be the same like he thinks it is.
I got your opinion a few months back about the idea of PFL purchasing or merging with Bellator, which finally happened late last year. We're going to get this PFL versus Bellator event coming up. And then after that, the Bellator brand is still going to be used. It's still going to be sticking around. What are your thoughts on this kind of strategy the PFL is going with? And instead of having another brand under their own, like they're planning to do with these separate Bellator events, should they kind of go in a different direction with Bellator? Like maybe fights in a ring instead of a cage, or like how one does a variety of different combat sports on one card. Like, just because the Bellator brand seems at such a low point, it doesn't seem to have as much value. Maybe this is a chance to be creative and do something different to kind of make something out of it, because they put all this money into a PFL.
I'm not exactly sure what their strategy was. I was always skeptical of the direction that they were going to take after acquiring Bellator. It just seemed to me like a rich kid just buying things for the hell of it and not really having a plan. And then now that he's got this thing going, he doesn't really know what to do. But I do know that they cut some guys from Bellator. I'm sure some PFL guys might have to go. I'm not sure what their strategy is. It seemed like a good thing for like 5 minutes. Oh, wow, they got Bellator and PFL. But then when you stop to think about it, you go, wait a minute, but what exactly are they going to do with this? And then when you realize that, they're not going to have enough events to really keep the roster from both organizations, to me, it kind of sucks. I feel as though maybe what they should have did was they should have maybe taken a step back with Bellator and said, okay, we're not one of the premier leagues. Maybe we should try to, minimize our overhead and just do smaller shows and keep these guys on it. But they sent a bunch of guys packing. instead of saying, you know what, maybe we can minimize our overhead and do like an LFA type show or a CFFC type show and just keep it small just to keep them busy, and then maybe use it as a feeder league to get into the real Bellator or whatever else they want to do. But it seems to me like they just bought the show and now they have all these fighters and it was like, can't use this guy, can't use that guy, got to go. And I tell you what, even though this happened and the media was like, oh, I can't believe Bellator champ versus champ. At this time, when that was happening, I was talking to guys on the roster, good fighters on the roster, and they were like, man, I don't know what's happening. I don't know what they're doing with me. I don't know what's happening. So, you know, if they have a grand plan, I would love to see it, and I can't wait to see it, and I hope it benefits the fighters. But as of right now, I can't imagine what their strategy is in order to keep this thing running. But the good news is we will get to see Johnny Eblam and Impa Kasanganay. I mean, there are some benefits to it, but at the end of the day, like for the entire roster and the sport, is not a good thing for the fighters.
Anthony, you're on mute.
There we go. So actually that's good, because the audio of me talking and then Dean still talking would have been real bad. So we saved ourselves on that one. Dean, speaking of grand plans, I mean, UFC 300 is perhaps the most hyped event in the history of the promotion. Everybody's talking about what it's going to be, who's going to be in the main event. We've just officially ruled out Conor McGregor, and there's all this speculation about who's going to be up there. You're a guy with access to some of the people in the know at the UFC. You're a guy who's around all the talent. If it's up to you, with no limitations, no restrictions whatsoever, what's your UFC 300 main event?
Honestly, I would have kept it at Justin Gaethje, Max Holloway. That was a main event enough for me. I was happy with that fight. I mean, we're talking about two of the most violent, most decorated, violent guys in the UFC. But we didn't already minimize them by saying that they're not main event material, by saying that they can't headline this. So now we kind of have to find something bigger. But if it was up to me, that would have been the main event. To me, that was good enough. The card is so stacked. I thought the card was great. I mean, if you look back to UFC 200, it was a great card in the beginning until what happened,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And the next thing you know, you got Anderson Silva stepping in on short notice, Amanda Nunes fighting, Miesha Tate for the main event. I mean, so I think we put so much pressure on the UFC because they've been giving us these great fights. We've been so spoiled. We put so much pressure on them that now we feel as though a fight like Justin Gaethje and Max Holloway can't headline UFC 300. I believe it can. To me, that would have been my main event. I'm tired of putting so much weight on Conor McGregor or John Jones, these guys that they're great for the sport, but they're more great for themselves. We just happen to get some of the waves off of how great they are. But at the end of the day, man, you know, the guys out there doing it for the sport, Max Holloway, Justin Gaethje, going out there, stepping up, putting their life on the line, giving us entertainment. I would have been happy with that main event, but I'm sure the UFC's got something up their sleeve.
You know, I'm glad that you're echoing a lot of the thoughts going on in my head with all this, because I think, if I'm not mistaken, as of right now, Cody Garbrandt and Figueiredo are opening the entire event, right? They are the curtain jerker for the entire event. I'm sorry, like, what else do you want? Like, that's a premier
That's what I'm
fight.
saying. Like, what more can you get? What more can you get? I mean, there was a time where Cody Garbrandt was the best 135 on the planet. There was a time where Figgy was the best 125 on the planet. He's moved up in weight, absolutely destroyed Rob Font. And now we got, Cody Garbrandt, who's still, in my opinion, the most gifted fighter on the UFC roster in terms of his physical abilities, his speed, his balance, the way he strings his techniques together. He's the most physically gifted fighter in the UFC. He can't always win, doesn't have the greatest chin, but one of the most gifted fighters. And he's opening up the card. And yet we're expecting Jesus Christ to come back and fight. I don't get it.
I mean, while we're on the topic of great fights that are on these pay-per-views, I mean, 298 is, as of we're recording this, is next week. 299, another banger card, and of course 300. I mean, with these three huge pay-per-views on the way, what are some of the fights that you're really looking forward to the most? I mean, you're going to be cage-side for a lot of this, so please.
I'm be cage-side for all of them. So yeah, I'm really excited for this. You know, me and my partner on Sirius XM, RJ Clifford, had this discussion, and he says this is the best 2-month stretch in MMA history. And he's got to be right about that in terms of what we're getting delivered to us right at our doorstep. Just great fights back to back to back to back. And I might be totally off base on this, but the fight I'm looking forward to most is Petr Yan and Song Yadong.
Hey.
And you guys are like, I forgot about that one.
Yeah.
But for me, I'm just like, because the 135-pound division is my favorite division. And those are two of my favorite bangers in the division in terms of like just staying in the pocket, good defense, just punching each other in the face. So for whatever reason, I'm just so interested in watching that fight. And then if I had to pick another one, again, I might be totally off base, but this just speaks to the magnitude of how great these cards are. Jessica Andrade and Marina Rodriguez. I'm so looking forward to that fight. And that just speaks to how great these fights are in the next couple of months.
Just throwing out there wherever you're listening to this, watching this, please like, share, subscribe. Let us know what your thoughts. Let us know your thoughts on UFC 300, UFC 298, stuff like that. So the next question for me, Dean, is it now seems like Conor McGregor, a summertime return is no longer likely. Now we're talking about maybe the fall. You know, for a person covering the sport for a long time, been there for his rise and everything like that, is there a point where he kind of just damages his brand enough to where it kind of loses a lot of value? Fans have such a short attention span nowadays, and he's kind of hit this ridiculous level of acting like he wants to fight and doesn't fight. Or is he just kind of just golden and he can disappear for 5 years and no one would care and they'd still love when he comes back?
That's yet to be seen. If it was up to me, he would lose his esteem. I don't like it. I don't like playing with people's emotions like that. I don't like when a guy has as much leverage as he does to be able to do what he's doing, to be able to string Michael Chandler along, to be able to have an entire season of Tough revolve around him totally disrespect that whole show and not show up half the time. And then when it comes to fight, him not fight. I just don't like him stringing the entire community along. And I'm hoping that we just forget about him. I really wish we could just forget about him. So he obviously makes a ton of money for us not to forget about him. And the UFC obviously has a lot of faith that when he does fight, it's going to really do numbers. So I just don't like giving a guy that much power. I wish we could just forget about him because, like me personally, I done forgot about him. But the community still, the fan base still likes him. The fan base still would want to watch him fight. He's got this movie coming out, so I thought that maybe he would fight to promote this movie. But who knows, man? Like, how do you already rule out the summer? It's February. You ruled out the summer? I might even fight in the summer. I haven't even ruled it out yet. And I've been retired for over a decade.
Oh, man. Well, I mean, Dean,
I don't get it.
I'm with you on that, man. One other thing that I wanted to ask you about, you and John Anik, broadcast partners, two people who I think the overall fan base has a lot of respect and esteem for, two of the more well-liked guys that we can regularly hear on every broadcast. I mean, he ruffled some feathers with his criticism of that fan base very recently. Can you relate at all to his experience? And if you can, like, how have you dealt with that?
So I can relate totally. I know where John is coming from. And I spoke to him on this too, man. I had a conversation with him about this. And he felt kind of bad for saying the things that he said just because, he is a man of the people. He's so respectful. He works harder than anybody in the game. And when people come at him, he takes that very personally because he treats this as if it's his craft. Like, this is a part of who he is. And when you come at his craft, you're coming at him as a man. So he took it a little bit personally. But then he just had a moment, right? He had a moment of got a little emotional and said some things. And I told him, I said, man, look, go to Walmart at 2 a.m. and look around. And what you see a bunch of aliens from another planet. It looks like a city from Star Wars. That's who's talking trash to you. Do you really care if they talk trash to you? I said, that's who's really, because people of high value and respect for themselves don't get on the internet and start talking trash about people. And sometimes I think what it is because John associates with good people, so he just thinks everybody might be a good person, or at least a decent enough person. So when he hears stuff coming back at him, he might think it's coming from those people, but it's not coming from those people. It's coming from the lowest common denominator, the muck of the world, the scumbags of the world. It's coming from that. So I don't even want them on my side. So so that's where me and John differ. Like, I don't care what they say about me. I'm a man of the people. I love the people. I never turn away a fan. I never turn away a picture. But if you got something to say about me, I don't care one bit. I don't. To me, it's like, because I know where it's coming from. It's coming from some dude in a wheelchair with one leg and bumps all over his face. I don't care.
Before we get into UFC 298 stuff, and I want to continue on that because, me and Anthony, we've covered this sport for a long time. You've been in the industry for a long time. For Sportsnaut, I cover other sports like NFL, NBA, and stuff like that. And I just feel like UFC fans, MMA fans can be exhausting. And they can be some of the weirdest, hardest to please, nonsensical fans. But you've been around. You were around near the dark ages, and when it was very different, and people were like looking at the sport, it wasn't legal everywhere. Do you feel MMA fans have gotten better, or with the growth of it, it's drawn in even the worst of the worst more so than ever before?
I mean, it's done both. Fans have gotten better, but then they've also gotten worse. Now, I've been involved in MMA since the mid-90s. I started doing this in 1994. Had my first amateur fight in 1995. So I've always been involved in this. But back then it was different. We were still trying to prove ourselves as legitimate athletes. So it's a big difference now because as we've proven ourselves as legitimate athletes, people think that we are actually bigger than what we really are. They think that, Phil Rowe told me a story about he was hanging out with some NBA players, and they was thinking that he got it like them. They thought he had it. They thought his pockets was deep like theirs. Like these guys making $10 million a year. They thought he had it like that, and he was just kind of like, yeah, but he ain't telling me he didn't though. So like, I don't believe. I hope it never get back to the NBA players, but he don't. But you know what I'm saying. But we don't got it. We don't got it like that. But a lot of people think that we do now. But back in the day, they knew we didn't have it because we was just, we was struggling back in the day. So it's good. It's good now because now I can compartmentalize the game and just stick to the positive stuff and the growth and look at how far we've come as opposed to focusing on some of the detractors of the sport.
Dean, can you do me a big favor, please? Can you tell Phil to not try to go bottle for bottle with any NBA players in the club?
Yeah, that's what was happening.
Oh no,
Phil.
No.
Phil going bottle for bottle. I was like, and he said, "Oh no, what did I do?"
Man, you need a hell of a few fight night bonuses to come back from that night.
Yeah, he did not. Yeah, he learned a valuable lesson that night.
All right, so let's round up the show. Let's do some UFC 298 previews, thoughts, picks, and stuff like that. We're not gonna do all the fights. We're just gonna cover the top 4 fights. And the first one I wanted to talk about is Ian Gary, another interesting step up in competition against Jeff Neal. At this point, Ian's a pretty sizable favorite in this one, coming off a big win recently against his Neil Magny. Dean, what are your thoughts on this fight? From what you've seen, is Ian Gary for real? Is this the guy that can become the next big star out of Ireland? How do you like his chances against Jeff Neal? Or is Jeff Neal like a seriously live underdog people are underestimating?
He's a seriously live underdog, but at the end of the day, you have to root for Ian Gary because his ceiling is higher. His potential to be around MMA for a long time and give us more is higher than Jeff Neal. Jeff Neal should win that fight, in my opinion. Jeff Neal, if these guys train in a room every day with nobody watching and just show up and Jeff Neal was hungry enough, Jeff Neal will probably beat him up. But that's not what the fight game is about. The fight game is about everything. It's about doing media, being on, showing up, fight night, performing, making weight. It's all that. And despite everything that's going on in Ian Gary's life right now, Ian Gary is a true professional, and he does all the stuff that MMA requires of a star. So he deserves to win in that respect. Because he's going to be around in 5 years, still giving us great performances. Jeff Neal's a guy who tremendously dangerous, probably one of the hardest hitters in the welterweight division, but he's inconsistent, and sometimes you could tell he doesn't want to be there. Sometimes he doesn't show up. He starts slow. He doesn't make weight sometimes, and it's a little disheartening, but that's just the type of fighter he is. And I think the UFC recognizes that, and if there's any doubt in his head that he can lose against Ian Gary's going to beat him. But if he comes in hungry, it's a good thing they've taken some time off. You haven't seen Saif Saud in the corner in the last couple of months. He said he told his guys, we taking some time off. We're going to get back together. We're going to get this ship rolling again. So he had his guys in the gym, not fighting every weekend, in the gym, working on their mistakes, getting better. So hopefully he was able to get through to Jeff Neal, and Jeff Neal can give us a little bit more of Jeff Neal than what he has in the past.
Anthony, how do you see this fight going?
Man, I'm leaning toward Gary, but I think the deciding factor is going to be the level of aggression he shows. If he can keep Neal on the back foot, that's his path to victory. And Gary has done a very good job of keeping everybody on the back foot. He's going to have to worry about the power, but I think Gary is not necessarily the easiest guy to hit. So I think the level of risk for him lowers a lot with him being the aggressor, and slipping those shots and trying to land those like really quick, like not even turning your hip leg kicks, hitting those calves. And I think Neal's going to have a rough night. However, if Neal comes in with a particular level of confidence and bravado, that can throw a monkey wrench in that idea. I just don't see that happening. I think Gary is too skilled. I think he's too confident. It's going to be his night, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's going to be Gary, but I think it's going to be a really hard fight. I'm sure a lot of people are going to look at the MMA match and say, oh, well, Jeff Neal lost to Magny, Ian beat Magny. It's just apples to oranges, just different kinds of fighters. But I really think I'm surprised the betting odds is this high. I mean, this is a guy that's beaten Vicente Luque, Santiago Ponzinibbio. These are big, proven good fighters in the UFC. So if Jeff beat him, I would not be surprised at all. Wouldn't be shocked. I still have my questions about Ian Gary, but yeah, I think Ian Gary's gonna to pull this one out, get a hard close fought win. But moving on from there, another big fight: Robert Whittaker versus Paul Costa. A fascinating matchup, fascinating clash of different strikers. A huge fight within the division. A lot of people looking forward to this. Dean, how do you see this? Are we at a point? This is fascinating because Paul Costa seemed like he was going to be the guy, and just can't stay healthy, can't fight, just inconsistent. But Robert Whittaker, and going back to your point earlier, you hit a certain point in age, you're not the same fighter anymore. It's just hard to maintain that. And Robert Whittaker seems to be kind of nearing that, especially after that loss, that shocking loss DDP. Like, is this kind of the brain says, oh, Robert Whittaker should win. He's one of the greatest of all time, especially at middleweight. But is this kind of one of those things where it's just another part of an age maybe based decline for Robert Whittaker?
I don't think so. I think this is actually a good fight for Robert Whittaker. I've spoken to him, and I like the way he trains. He says he doesn't train to fight these guys. He trains to beat these guys. I think he might have made a mistake in the training for Dricus. Maybe there was something he didn't see or didn't cover in the preparation for that. But I think he's on his way with this fight. There's something about Paulo Costa that I am not sold on. I'm just not sold on him, man. Like you said, when he came out, he seemed like the next big thing. He seemed like he was going to be that guy. Came out, had fast hands. You was like, oh, man, this guy. But he never seemed to get better. And that's what this fight game is about. It's about evolution between fights. And that was the one thing that made Kamaru Usman so great, was that Usman, when he first started, he was on this trajectory that you knew he was going to be good because he kept getting better each time he fought. He always added an element to his game that made him more dangerous and made it harder for people to prepare for him. But I haven't seen that with Paulo Costa. In fact, it seems like it's easier to prepare for Paulo Costa now more than ever. You know, if Luke Rockhold did what he did to him, I mean, that was one of the funnest, sloppiest, worst fights I've ever seen. But
yeah, yep.
But he just, to me, I'm just not sold on him. He had a great fight against Yoel Romero, but knowing how Yoel fights, Yoel doesn't really fight until the last minute of the last round. It makes sense why they had a good fight, because Yoel didn't fight him. So I'm just not sold on Paulo Costa. I just don't see a high upside for him, and this is his opportunity to make me put my foot in my mouth. And I like it when guys do. When guys hear me talk trash about him, I'm saying it because I want you to shut me up. I want to see a great performance. That's what I want. And when you're not giving it to me, I'm questioning what you've been doing for the last 6 months. Like, if you're supposed to be training, show me.
Anthony, what are your thoughts?
I swear, Dean just like put a TV screen connected to my brain and just read exactly what I was thinking about this fight. I have, and you, Jason, you know this because we've been, partners and colleagues and stuff doing this together for a very long time now. I've been saying this ever since we first met. Paulo Costa has never impressed me. I've never been sold on Paulo Costa. He's always, his wins have always come at the right time against the right opponents. And by circumstance, he's been able to propel himself to the heights that he has, and all credit to him for doing that. But against a guy like Robert Whitaker, that's just not good enough. If this version of Luke Rockhold took you to the brink of destruction, what do you think Robert Whitaker can do to you? What do you think one of the most skilled middleweights in history, who, granted, he did just lose, but he lost against the current champion, what do you think that man is capable of doing to you? Paulo Costa always has that factor of just being strong and being a brute and, underrated ground game. But we're also talking about a Robert Whitaker whose wrestling skills are perhaps the most underrated in the sport. We're talking about one of the most skilled strikers who's got so much nuance to his kickboxing technique that he could, on his good day, he could make a facsimile of what Adesanya did to Costa, to take that level of brute aggression against someone who's so skilled and so precise. Normally turns into a very embarrassing night for the aggressor. Unless Costa is able to land some sort of Thanos Infinity Gauntlet of a strike, it's just not happening. I think Whitaker is going to have one of the easiest, most impressive nights of his career.
I agree with both of you guys. I'm gonna go with Whitaker myself, but I do have my concerns about Robert. I do feel while he's 33, he's a different type of 33. 10 decisions he's gone to in the UFC, fighting often at the highest level, some absolute war, some really tough fights. I do feel like on a level his reflexes, they have slowed down just enough. I think fighters are getting better reads on him. He was a tougher matchup for a lot of people now that the scouting reports are out there on him a little bit. I think people are dealing with him better. And I just think he's had enough damage put on him where the longer he's in fights, especially with a power punch like Paulo, that things can happen. Just like the Dricus fight. I didn't think Dricus looked better than him, but it just, you get hit with a big one, and it changes it. So I still think Robert's going to win, but I do think there's a part of me that wonders he's kind of just, that happens to great fighters all the time, been in a lot of wars, and then just a steep decline all of a sudden. He's going to do everything to avoid it, but the Robert Whitaker we all know, I don't think is going to show up again. That said, if there's any time to prove the world wrong, this is it. Showing that I'm still the top guy, and like you said, Dean, this is a really good matchup for him, so that could totally happen too. Moving on from that, co-main event, Merab Dvalishvili versus Henry Cejudo. Henry Cejudo, former 2-division champion, Olympic gold medalist, is the underdog in this, which says a lot about how people are looking at Henry Cejudo. Also, just how underrated Merab was for so long. Finally, the word is out. This guy is a tough dude to handle, just a nightmare. One of the greatest cardios maybe in UFC history, up there with the best of the best, Diegos, the Diaz brothers, the Cain Velasquez. Insane cardio, and that's such a lethal weapon. On a pure talent level, Cejudo was better striking. You would think better pedigree of wrestling, but again, that relentless style. All of that said, does Merab get another big upset? Not upset. I mean, it's still an upset to me, even though he's a favorite, but still a great pelt on the wall, Dean, or does Henry Cejudo show, look, that fight with Aljamain was very close. Maybe a couple different things he could have won that fight. He's still an elite. He shows there's level to this, and Merab isn't at that level.
Henry Cejudo, they call him Triple C. Well, he calls himself Triple C, and he has every right in the world to do so. He was an Olympic gold medalist. That's something that 99.999% of wrestlers can't do.
Yep.
Then he goes off and becomes a UFC feather or flyweight champion, something that 99.99% of fighters can't do. Then he wins the bantamweight belt. 99.999% of fighters. He's done things that there's no one who has a more impressive combat sports career than that. Like, to win that level of achievement is absolutely crazy. And with that being said, he's not there no more. It's sad to say, but he can't be there no more. Like, when he was doing those things, he was young, fresh, hungry. He had that eye. Now he's a tremendous analyst. I watch his stuff. He breaks fights down really well. He understands the game probably as good as anybody in the world. But doing it and understanding it is a big difference. Especially, and I'm telling you from experience, when I stopped fighting, I got better at fighting because I understood it better. And I think that's where Henry is now. So if I reverse engineer that mindset, he's better at fighting now because he can't do all the things that he used to do. So, and the fact that he can't do all the things that he used to do, that was win 3 championships the way he did. I don't see him winning this fight. It sucks that he can't win this fight, but Merab is probably going to run through him.
Wow. Anthony? Some bold things to follow.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I'm not going to agree with is I don't think Merab runs through him. But everything else sounds about right to me. I think Cejudo is still got enough athletic talent in him, along with the improved fight IQ and just the extra intellect that has gone into his coaching and his analyst abilities. I think that's going to serve him well to keep him competitive. But we're talking, Merab is a different sort of guy. Like, we're not talking about, just your rank and file bantamweight right here. This is a guy who should have been fighting for the title a couple of years ago. And only because of his friendship with Aljamain Sterling, it didn't happen. So I think even that too, just knowing that prize is there for him if he gets through Cejudo, I think we see an even more motivated and even more dangerous version of Merab. So yeah, I think Merab wins this. It's going to be tough in spots. I think as the fight begins. Maybe to the halfway mark, we'll see Cejudo do some intelligent things and shut certain parts of his game off. But youth and the hunger and the drive is going to take over in that latter half, and I think he gets the decision win.
Can I add on to something here too? And I think part of the reason why I can't see Henry winning this fight is because I don't think his ground game is dangerous enough. I think he understands wrestling, he understands positioning, but I think a guy like I know on paper it looks like O'Malley would get destroyed by Merab, but I think O'Malley would actually do better against Merab than Henry, just because O'Malley has a higher pedigree of jiu-jitsu in the sense of fighting off of his back, and his legs are longer, and his submissions are probably a little bit more dangerous. And I just don't see that with Henry. I think Henry's going to have to try to out-wrestle Merab, and technically he should be able to, like on paper, he should be able to, but from an MMA perspective, I just see it being really hard for him.
Yeah, this is a tough one for him to pick because it's just like you laid out, Dean. Like, there's so many reasons Henry should be better, and all the credentials and everything. And it's not like he's later in age, near his 40s, like still in like good athletic years. But yeah, the fire, the hunger's there. You're going against the guy who's hungry. I think a key element that has to play some level of role is, Merab being closer to Aljamain. They've trained under the same style with Matt Serra. They understand, they have similar kind of things in those ways, and to know from Aljamain, okay, this worked. This was able to, I tried this, you know what I mean? We've done this. I tried it. This didn't work. That did work. That little inside intel, I think, is so valuable in a fight like this, because maybe he's not as technically skilled as Aljamain, but has that information that's so great and helpful. Yeah, I'm probably gonna lean Marab too. Very hard fought decision. Another one that's a shame for Cejudo, but it's a tough one. I'm super either way. Really looking forward to that fight. Now moving on, main event. Woof. Alexander Volkanovski, a small favorite over Ilya Tuporia. Tuporia really is one of the hidden gems. Finally getting some mainstream notoriety now. He's in these big fights, but has been like a hidden gem in the game for a while now. Just as well rounded as it gets. A kind of another modern era kind of fighter. Just does everything super well. Not jumping off the page as one certain thing. Just really good, fundamental everywhere. Dean, is this the Usman versus Woodley moment? Is this, almost like Hendricks versus GSP? It's like Alexander's been great, and finally people are going to catch up with him just because the natural thing of a great fighter. You get up in their age, you've been there a long time in a fight, maybe you lose a little bit of hunger. Is this where the Alexander Volkanovski era finally ends, where he's a champion that's done it all, not much else to do, and he's going to get just an absolutely hungry, talented fighter?
I wish I was in his camp to see his mentality and see what's going on inside his camp, because this question would be a lot easier if I seen him even running around the PI. But I haven't seen him to know what things are like in his camp, because it could very well be that it could be a situation where we're looking at a guy he's at the end of it. But I don't think so. I think he got caught. He got caught with his pants down against Islam. Took that fight on 10 days notice.
Yeah.
Wasn't sparring. So he was, he got baited into a kick that he wasn't prepared for, because he just wasn't used to looking at somebody in front of him and sparring for a couple weeks. So, but if he's done his homework, I think he finds some holes in Ilya. Now, Ilya looks like a guy with no holes. There's something about Ilya, and I asked him about this, that it reminds me of Canelo Alvarez. He's very Canelo Alvarez-esque in terms of very efficient puncher, goes to the body, can knock you out, just very clean and calm and composed, and seems to always be in the right position. Now, with that being said, he's got to have a guy willing to stay in front of him. And I think that's the one thing that Volk is going to be good at, and that's just creating angles and creating spots for himself to get Ilya to make mistakes. He's got to get Ilya to make mistakes. But Volkanovski's been so good about getting guys to make mistakes. So I think Volk wins this fight, and he still has about another year left. And then after that, he's going to go downhill. He will deteriorate.
Anthony?
Well, this is the first time on this show today that I'm gonna dissent from my man Dean here. I think we have a new champion, and I would say things would be different if Volkanovski did not take that short notice fight against Makhachev. We're talking about a guy who just got knocked out cold, a couple months back. Was coming off of a shoulder surgery, if I'm remembering correctly. Rolled right into surgery rehab into a brutal knockout fight against a guy who's much bigger, much heavier, and probably packs more of just pure power than Topuria, right? So he's, he should be taking some time to let his brain heal, but he's going in there against an absolute killer in Ilya. Also, but what I do think is going to happen, though, I don't think that we're going to have this this performance like Topuria's had. We haven't really seen him tested in the UFC. We've seen him just buzz through everybody that he's fought, and he did that on the regional scene as well. He just completely tore through everyone he's fought. But this time, though, Volkanovski is going to give the blueprint on what Topuria's weaknesses are. On the way to Topuria getting crowned champion, he's going to get drugged through the ringer a little bit, and the rest of the division will see how they can crack the code of Ilya Topuria. Still gets the belt, though.
But there's something that you said that's not 100% accurate. He has been tested, and he passed that test with flying colors. He passed it better than I've seen anybody ever pass a test before. When Jai Herbert kicked him in the head, dropped him, and he comes back and knocks him out. And that was upper weight class. That was passing a pretty good test to me.
That's right.
So,
That's right. I
but-
forgot about that one. You're right.
Yeah, but I'm still sticking to my guns. To me, this reminds me of a Floyd Mayweather Canelo Alvarez fight, where just one guy is just the other version of the other guy a few years after.
I'm gonna have to go. I'm gonna go with Anthony on this one. Yeah, I'm just. It just feels like that changing of the guard moment. We've seen it with so many legendary fighters that you just hit a point where you just dominate for so long, and I think there's just those little things that change in life. Maybe you get a loss, maybe a goal is taken off. You can't do much more at featherweight. Like even the best of the best, the hunger just leaves. Like he's done everything he can at featherweight. He tried to live out the dream again, beat a 2-division champion, failed both times. Like like the fact that he's fighting 4 months later, like Anthony said about the, after a knockout, I think that's very interesting. I don't think that benefits him. Like, I wonder what his goal, his desires in this fight is. And Dean, you nailed it. Like, what's he doing in camp? I'm curious too. Is he pumped? Is he fired up? Is he ready to prove everybody wrong? Is he just doing this for the payday? Is the UFC forced him into it? It doesn't feel great. And I just have so much respect for Ilya's talents. I think he's such a good fighter. I just think he mirrors so many other fighters on the rise up that they are just too talented to deny. And I do feel he gets a win. I think he gets a stoppage. I'm gonna say third round. Do you like Dean? How do you think Volk wins the decision? And how do you think that he ends the fight?
Yeah, I think Volk wins a decision. I think Volk wins a decision. I think Ilya is too tough, and he's going to put up a really good fight. I think he's going to really show his best work, but just going to be outcrafted by a craftier guy.
Anthony, how does Ilya win?
I think by decision. But I'm really hoping that Volk wins, just because Taporia's been talking a lot of foolishness about not defending the belt in the division, and I'm tired of that. I want champions to stay fighting in their weight class. Just give us. Can we get 3 defenses before we start talking about anything else?
Hold on, wait a minute. He has been saying that. He's like, I'm not giving none. What does he expect to do with the belt then?
Yeah.
I don't know. He's gonna pull a Jermaine Durandamy or something. I don't know what what his intent is. I just don't want to see that happen.
Hey, this is what you guys wanted, man. I mean, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but this is what we wanted when we said, "Yo, fighters need more power." This is what we wanted. You give these guys power, man. They don't know how to act. They gotta play. They gotta play fair, man. They gotta play fair. We give them some power, play fair. Still good for some fights.
Yeah.
All right, so wherever you are watching, listening to this, again, please like, share, subscribe. That is the end of this episode of the Scrap Report. I am Jason Burgos. Thank you so much, Dean Thomas, for joining us again. He's Anthony Walker. Until next time, everybody, bye-bye.